Skald Circle, tales of myths and legend as told by Minogan and Pan Casimir. Today we're beginning with Thor and Loki's journey to Utgard. Now, just as all good stories begin, one day Thor and Loki were bored. And so, Thor turned to Loki and said, "Loki,
Yes.
we should go to Utgard and participate in the Giants' festivals there."
I think that's a good idea. Let's go there.
"Let's do it then. Come." And so, Thor and Loki got into Thor's magical chariot, which is pulled by his two goats, and they rode off out of Asgard and through Midgard. For you see, it's a long journey, and as they were journeying, it began to get dark, and so they had to stay somewhere. So they went to a farmer's house, and they went up to the door, and Thor said, "We would like to stay in your house." And so, well, the farmer, you really cannot say no to Thor, for he is a god after all. And so the farmer welcomed it in, but they said, "Oh, but Thor, we are very poor people. We will not be able to feed you." And so Thor said, "Do not worry. I will feed you my goats. But you must make certain you do not break the bones. Other than that, you may eat all of the meat you wish." And so Thor went and he butchered his goats, and he brought the meat in to roast for the family, and they all ate very well. But the farmer's son, he thought, why should we waste these good marrow bones? For marrow is meat butter after all. And so he took one of the femur bones, and he broke it open, and he sucked out all of the marrow, and he placed it back in with the rest of the bones, thinking Thor would be none the wiser. But the next morning came, and Thor went out over his goat skins with the bones. He raised his mighty hammer above them, and the goats came back to life. But now one of them had a limp, and so Thor yelled out in his loudest voice, "Who?" And all of the farmers were woken up with a fright. For you see, it is unpleasant to be woken up early in the morning. It is even more unpleasant to be woken by an angry thunder god.
Now, when you have an angry thunder god on your doorstep, you need to appease him so he does not slay you. So, he called out all of the peasants, lined them up and went, "Okay, here's what we are going to do. You have two choices. Either you can give me your son as an indentured servant, or I can kill you." And out of those two options, they went, "Okay, you can have our son." So, the son's name was Thjalfi, and he now traveled with Thor and Loki, and they continued their journey to Utgard. Now, journeys are long. When you have a long journey, you have your beginning, your resting point, and your end. The end was too far away, so they needed to set up camp. Thjalfi ran forward from where Thor and Loki were, and in so doing, found a strange sort of building. It was a large hall, sort of circular almost, and it had 5 individual hallways, but they didn't go anywhere. And he was confused and looked about, but didn't see anything that looked ominous, so he ran back to Thor and Loki and went, "You know, I found this hall. Why don't we stay there?" And Thor went, "Okay." And then they went and stayed there. Now, it was warm, it was dry, almost a good staying place. However, they kept being wakened in the middle of the night by rumblings and grumblings of what Thor explained away as earthquakes. Then the next day, when they woke up, they looked up and saw the biggest giant that they had ever seen. From about that tree all the way over to that white tent over there. The largest giant they had ever seen. And Thor looked up and went, "Oh."
And the giant looked down at Thor and said, "Oh, you are Thor the Thunderer. I must admit, I expected you to be bigger. What are you doing in the giant lands, Thor?" And Thor looked up at the giant and said, "We are going to go journey to Utgard to participate in the giant king's feasts." And the giants looked down to Thor. He said, "You don't want to go to Utgard. It is not a good place for you." And Thor became indignant now, and he said, "No, we are going to go to Utgard, and we are going to go participate in the feasting there." The giant said, "Very well, if I cannot change your mind, I will at least journey with you." And so, the giant took up all of their things, put them inside of his pack, and he began to walk away into Utsgard. But now you see, this giant was so unbelievably tall that even at just a walking pace, Thor, Loki, and Thjalfi had to run as fast as they could to keep up with him. And the day wore on. And as the day wore on, Thor began to get more and more angry with this giant. And they eventually made their way to camp after the giant plopped down and said, "We are camping here." And he said, "I am tired, but if you all wish to eat, the pack is right there. You may try and open it." And so Thor went up to the pack, and as much as he pulled on the cord to unloosen the pack, he just made it tighter and tighter. And he was obviously very angry at the giant. He was the one he blamed for this nonsense. So he took up his hammer, he walked up to the giant, and he struck the giant as hard as he could in the head. The giant bolted upright from his sleep, and he said, "What? Did a leaf fall on my head?" And of course, Thor was horrified because his hammer had never failed him before. And he said, "No, I just wanted to let you know that dinner was ready." And the giant said, "All right, Thor, I'm going to go back to sleep now." And after they had their meal, which was very meager since they still couldn't open up the food storage, Thor went to bed. It was a very fitful sleep though, for he was now very upset. He opened his eyes at about midnight, and he decided, "I'm going to give it one more try." So he went over to the giant again, took up his hammer in two hands this time, and he swung as hard as he could to hit the giant. The giant bolted upright, and he said, "What? Did a bird make droppings on my head?" And Thor said, "No, you looked like you were having a nightmare. I wanted to wake you up." And the giant said, "Go to sleep, Thor." And Thor walked off, his head down, and he went back to bed. But he didn't fall asleep, for now he was very upset. The sun had just begun to rise, and the giant was still sleeping peacefully. Thor says, "I'm going to give it one more try, and then I'm never going to do it again." He crept over as quietly as he could. He took his hammer in two hands. He took a running start, and he leapt into the air and hit the giant. There was a thunder crack, and Thor was certain he had done it. When the giant bolted up and said, "What? Did an acorn fall on my head?" And Thor was dumbstruck. He said, "No, I just wanted to wake you up to let you know that we're going to be packing up camp." And the giant said, "All right, Thor. Utgard is just over that hill. I'm going to be leaving you now, but I will try to convince you one more time. Do not go to Utgard. It is not your place."
Now, they continued to follow the giant until they made it to a large keep. Very large. And the giant looked at them and said, "This is as far as I will take you. If you want to go in there, do so with caution. However, you are on your own." So he bid them farewell, and Thor bolted open the door and went, "I would like to feast with you." And the giant king looks at him and goes, "If you want to feast with us, you need to best us in a few challenges." And Thor goes, "Okay, I'm the greatest. I will best you in any of your challenges." And then Loki peers around the corner and goes, "I'm going to take the first challenge. I am the greatest at eating. I can out-eat any of your giants." And so, one of the other giants volunteered, and they set up two troughs, one here and one here, and filled it with vast amounts of meat. And as they did so, Loki looked at it and went, "Ah yes, this shall be an easy task." And as he waited, him and the other giant crouching over the trough, then the start was sounded, and Loki started to eat. He shoveled the meat into his mouth, and it looked like it was going very good. He went, "Oh, this is very easy and very good meat," until he finished emptying his trough, and he looks over with a triumphant grin on his face at the other giant and goes, "Ha! Oh!" For not only had the other giant eaten all of his meat already, but had also eaten the entirety of the wooden trough. And at this point, Loki just looks down in defeat and goes, "I don't want to play anymore." And so, a new challenge must be had. The Alfie, the indentured son that I told you about earlier from the farmer's house, he was the fastest man in the world. So he takes up the next challenge. He goes, I can beat any of your giants in a race. So what they did was set up a big track, many miles long. And all Thialfi had to do was cross the finish line 3 times before the giants. So they line up at the start line like runners do, one hand on the ground. And then one of the giants goes, go! And Thialfi starts to run, and he runs, and he runs, and he goes. And then he crosses the first lap's finish line, and he looks back and the giant's behind him and he goes, this is going to be easy. And he runs, and he runs, and he goes even faster. And then he hears a noise. And it's that sort of noise that goes, whoom, as the giant runs past him. And he goes, oh no, this is going to be bad. I can't lose too. So he runs harder, as fast as his little legs can take him. And as he finally crosses the second lap's finish line, the giant has already finished his 3rd lap. And he just looks there going, I don't know what happened. And goes to go sulk in the hallway.
And now, Thor had had enough of this. And he said, I will take any challenge you have of me. And the giant king walked up to him and said, fine, take this drinking horn. Our greatest warriors can drink all of it in 1 gulp. The okay warriors, they can drink it in 2. Even the children can drink it in 3 drinks. And so Thor took up the mighty horn and he said, I will drink it in just 1. And he raised it high up to his mouth and began to drink. He could not lift it very high, though it was very heavy. And he put it back down after taking a mighty swallow. And he looked down into the horn. The mead had not gone down at all. Thor was shocked. He was sure he'd be able to finish it all. He said, I will take 1 more drink. He raised the horn high again. He could not raise it that high though, and he took a second mighty drink. He looked down to the horn. The liquid had only gone down an inch. He said, no, I am not going to let this horn beat me. And while he was still very angry, he was only qualifying for the child's challenge. He raised the horn a 3rd time and drank as much as he could. He looked down to the horn. It had only drained 3 inches. There was still a lot of mead inside of the horn. Now, Thor was very upset. He turned to the giant king and said, I demand another challenge. And the giant king said, very well, Thor. There is a challenge that is fit specifically for the children, but I think you can handle it. And a mighty grey cat prowled out from under the giant king's throne. And the giant king turned to Thor and said, the children proved themselves by lifting my cat. If you can lift my cat, Thor, you may feast with us. And Thor was very upset that he was given a child's challenge again. But he said, very well, I will lift the cat. He went under the cat and he began to lift as high as he could. But Thor found the higher he lifted, the more the cat's back arched. And just the cat's back arched higher and higher and higher. And Thor was up on his tiptoes and just a single foot was lifted off the ground. And Thor slumped back down in defeat. And he said, I demand 1 more challenge and then I will go. And the giant king said, very well. You will wrestle, but you will not just wrestle anyone. You will wrestle my wet nurse. Now Thor was very upset, for he was being made to wrestle an old lady who lived in the castle. He said, very well. They both went over to the wrestling ring. Thor stepped in, braced himself to grapple with the old woman. He braced their arms against each other and Thor he was going to go easy on her because she was a little old lady. And he didn't put much pressure, and suddenly he was pushed back and pinned on the ground. And Thor was like, all right, it's on now. And he pushed as hard as he could against the old woman. Her back began to go backwards, but he pushed and pushed when suddenly she snapped back and pinned him to the ground. And that was the best 2 out of 3. So Thor, in his best childlike temper tantrum, said, I never wanted to feast here anyway. Loki, Thialfi, let's go.
Fine, let's go.
And he grabbed them both by the neck and they walked out of the hall. And as they were leaving at Utgard, they went through the gate. And waiting for them was the giant king. And he said, Thor, Loki, the Alf, you are not nearly as bad as you think you are. For you see, Loki,
Yes.
when you ate against the giant, you are not facing an opponent of mortal ilk. You were eating against wildfire itself. And Thialf, you were not racing just any giant, you were racing the speed of thought. It was a wonder you went as well as you did. And Thor, when you drank from the drinking horn, it was connected to the oceans. You drank 3 inches off the oceans itself and gave the oceans tides. You can see your effects just even now. And when you attempted to lift the cat, that was no cat. That was the world serpent, Jormungand, that circles the world. And you lifted it so high that its back brushed the skies. And when you wrestled the old woman, that was no old woman, that was old age, and you nearly beat her. You cannot stay in Utgard not because you are not worthy. You are too dangerous to stay here. And that is not even all. The giant that you journeyed with here, that was me in disguise, and you nearly had me 3 times. But I used my magic to disguise me. And when you struck me, you struck not me, but the mountain range. Do you see over there? That used to be one great mountain. And now, there are many. That is the work of your hammer. So go now, Thor, Loki, and Thjalfi. You are not welcome in Utgard ever again. And Thor, in his indignance, went to strike the Giant King. But the giant and Utgard all disappeared before his eyes.
Oh, spooky.
And that is the tale of Thor and Loki's journey to Utgard.
Now, before we begin our next tale, which is Thor's Marriage, do please be aware that if you are enjoying this show and want to throw us even a single dollar, we would very much appreciate it. And of course, we release free stories every month on our website. You can find that on the flyer there. And we also have our first CD coming out this month. Stories of the Norse, Viking Storytime, at 57 minutes of length. If you're interested in a CD, you may pre-purchase one from Ali over there. Now, before we get too far, let us do Thor's Marriage!
Now, it was very early in the morning when Thor had woken up, and just was as customary, he went searching for his hammer. And as he was grappling around, he realized in his fright, his hammer was missing. Thor bolted up and he began to run around Asgard in a fright looking for his hammer. And of course, being the logical man that he is, he ran to Loki first because everything that goes wrong is Loki's fault. And he went to Loki. Loki, my hammer is missing.
That, what?
You have to go find it.
Our only weapon?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Let me go to Freya, all right?
Go.
Okay, I'm going! So, Loki went to Freya, for Freya possessed a hawk skin that he could turn into, for Loki was also a shapeshifter. So he peers into her keep and goes, Freya, I need a favor. And fortunately, she goes, what do you want? Because Loki's not generally very well received. And Loki goes, I need to borrow your hawk skin. And Thor lost his hammer and I need to go find it. And Freya looks at him with a look that only a disapproving mother can give anyone and goes, not our only weapon. You take this skin. You go find the hammer and you go now. So Loki took the skin and he started to fly up looking for wherever it was.
And as Loki was flying, he flew over Jotunheim because clearly it was the giant's fault the hammer was missing. And he swooped down, and there was Thiazi, one of the giant lords, who was sitting on a log looking very smug and happy with himself. And he flew down and said to Thiazi, Thiazi, do you know what happened to Thor's hammer? And Thiazi said, well, I don't know what happened to Thor's hammer, but I know where my hammer is. And Loki went to Thiazi and said, we need the hammer back. It's not our only weapon,
No!
but we just want it back.
Yeah!
And Thiazi said, well, you can have the hammer back if you give me Freya's hand in marriage. And Loki then went, oh. Because, well, this would not make Freya happy. But, well, what had to be done had to be done. So Loki flew back to Asgard and he went to Freya, who was talking to Thor, and he said, all right, it's time to go get your bridal veil, it's time to get married.
At this point, Freya once again looks at them with that look on her face and goes, "Get out!" And it is rumored that the plates started to crack. The windows burst open until they were thrown from the hall with very pale looks on their face. And then the gods didn't quite know what to do, for Freya certainly was not going to let herself be married. No.
And so Thor and Loki, they went to all of the other gods, and they gathered in council to figure out what they should do to get the hammer back. When suddenly, one of the other trickster gods, the good one, Heimdall, not Loki, went up and said, I have an idea. Why don't we dress up Thor in a wedding dress and send him to the giants to get married? And Thor said, no, they'll all make fun of me. And Heimdall said, well, do you want your hammer back or not? And Loki said, don't worry, Thor, I will be your handmaiden. This will be perfectly fine. And so all of the gods swarmed around Thor, they dressed him in veil and white dress, and they got onto Thor's magical chariot, and they rode off to the giant lands to go to Thiazi's hall. And they walked in, and the giant was overjoyed, and he said, Freya, my bride, I am glad to have you here. Welcome into our hall, the feast is just beginning. And now, Thor in Freya's disguise was very, very hungry. So he went up to the massive food table, and he began to shovel food into his mouth. He took an entire half of cow, 4 salmons, all of the appetizers on the table, and 4 horns of mead to wash it all down. Now the giant was horrified. He said, by the gods, I've never seen a woman eat so much food before.
And then Loki piped up. He said, she's been very excited for her marriage and hasn't eaten for a fortnight. Normally she's much more behaved than she is now, I promise you. Don't worry about it.
And the giant said, very, very well. I'm glad that she is eating now. Then he walked up to Thor and he said, now, I wish to see my smiling bride. And he lifted up the veil and he fell back in shock. He said, by the gods, I've never seen such fire in someone's eyes. They're like hot coals.
Don't worry about it. She has been very excited about her wedding and she hasn't slept in a very long time as well. Normally she gets more sleep.
And the giant said, very well, we will begin the wedding ceremonies immediately. And the giant turned to his sister and said, now, go and get the hammer so we may begin the ceremonies properly. And his sister went and fetched Thor's magical hammer and walked up to Thor in Freya's disguise and whispered in Thor's ears, now, I'm sure you'll be giving me some of those rings on your fingers for the dowry, of course. Now this made Thor even angrier than he already was. So he was handed the hammer. He put the hammer between his legs, as was the custom. He then tore off his disguise, his wedding veil and his dress, raised his hammer high, and says, I am Thor the Thunder, and I have my hammer back. And he struck down all of the giants there, especially the sister who had the gall to ask for her dowry. And that is how Thor got his hammer back and was married. And I believe that is the end of our tales.
Indeed. Now, as I did say before, if you enjoyed this show, do feel happy to throw us a single $1 even. We would very much appreciate it. If not, we have free stories every month on our website, which you can find on those little sheets of paper. And our first CD is releasing this month, Stories of the Norse, Viking Storytime. And if you wish to pre-purchase that, because we don't have those with us yet, you may see Ali over there. Otherwise, we hope you enjoyed our show.
Huzzah!
Yay!